can't think of the term, Ollie. So we have some arrangements which are exclusive supplier arrangements, so that whatever they do with us is exclusive with us and not with any of our competitors. So the competitor for the Hawk aircraft in the outside environment might be Air Mackie, or it might be other jet trainer aircraft. We're in the Australian reference frame, and it's not really an issue for us, but our parent company is selling that aircraft into other potential users, and we would not want our suppliers to use information that they derive from our program in competition with us, with Air Mackie or whoever. So in those areas we do have some confidentiality agreements and exclusivity arrangements.
Okay.
So certainly it is an advantage, but we need to make sure that that advantage is for our benefit, not for everybody's.
All right, thank you. And to follow up with that, since you perceive it's an advantage, what are the factors you can identify, or you can think of, that influences this relationship with these supply chain partners?
Okay, so Ollie, factors influencing exchange of information across the supply chain. So thinking about it a bit, if we talk about relationship with suppliers, firstly, I think I'll start with trust. Any relationship or any information sharing really comes out of building a level of trust. And I think that on our supply base for the Hawk platform, we have quite a degree of trust, especially with our strategic suppliers. And some of those, by example, we've talked about. Some of that trust is I think, built by length of time working with them, location, where we know the physical interchange with that supplier, frequency of visits, and for some of our suppliers, indeed, they're actually on site here. So the relationship, I think, also is characterised by the management style that we use. We're not an organisation that's known for going straight to the contract and suing people. The example I've used with the generator is probably a reasonable one, in that we didn't try to sue the organisation for non-performance of reliability. We wanted to work with them to effect a solution. So that can be a little bit touchy at times, but so our relationship style is a little bit more team building and solutioneering rather than point scoring and who can sue who. I think this information flow across the supply chain is affected somewhat by confidentiality and exclusivity. As I said before, we wouldn't really want to share too much of our information that ends up in our competitors' hands, but we can certainly, there's lots of mechanisms of dealing with that, confidentiality agreements, exclusivity, teaming partnerships, those sorts of things. The other thing that does help us a fair bit is our contracts with some of our suppliers. Some of them are what's called performance-based contracts, where they are incentivised or penalised depending on whether it's positive or negative performance. But we have those contract arrangements actually encourage information flow to then solve problems and introduce innovations into the supply chain. And indeed our organisational structure I think facilitates that information flow. We do, from previous examples talking about the push button switches in the cockpit, we have a relationship with our suppliers that doesn't force us to go through intermediaries, and also our customer. So if I now talk about the customer, they are on site, or elements of the customer are on site. That does encourage a whole bunch of behaviours which are conducive to improved supply chain management. Again, if I go through that, having the customer close with us and can only really help but to build trust, which I think that does happen here on this program. The location, closeness of interrelationship. Certainly, we don't share Commonwealth information with other parties otherwise than with their consent. So information on reliability of equipment and problems with aircraft, they wouldn't want shared with other users necessarily, and so we always seek their consent before doing that. So that's really an answer from both a customer and a supplier perspective.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And you mentioned language and culture.
Yeah, I guess one of the things I think we benefit from is, it's a British aircraft and we all speak English, and most of the suppliers are English speaking. We do have some challenges in sometimes dealing with French companies and Italian companies. Mostly it's all done in English. We have a supplier who's in South Africa. That's all managed, but I think the way that we try to address that is not, is to try and do some personal interaction, given, the relative importance of the supplier or whatever, but usually a visit to that supplier once a year is usually the outcome. So in that supply chain for the Hawk program, we find ourselves visiting the UK, visiting France sometimes, visiting South Africa, and it keeps the relationship very active for not only the good things but also the bad things. So sometimes when there is a problem in the inability of a supplier to meet the required delivery date or whatever, we have then a relationship rather than just a cold email or a cold call that says, "Oi, you're late. What are you going to do about it?" You engender more of a teamwork response.
That's good. Thank you very much for the responses. Before we conclude this interview, I would like to ask if there is something about your experience in the supply chain field and supply chain sensing, that is, how the firms can sense opportunities from suppliers and customers. If there is anything from your experience you wish to share on that.
So Ollie, I'm thinking my experience, and particularly from this aircraft maintenance environment or maintenance and supply environment that we've talked through, I've been doing it for quite a while, and I guess from a supply chain perspective, we measure, and indeed our customer measures, supply chain effectiveness as with regard to availability of material when they need it, the reliability of that material or equipment, its failure rate and its ability to remain functioning on the aircraft, and affordability. So you can have every spare part in the store when you need it, but to do that, it comes at an extremely high cost, both in inventory of consumables and inventory of repairable items. And our customers, and most customers, don't have infinite budgets. So availability, reliability and affordability. The thing that the supply chain can really manage best is availability and affordability. Most programs are characterised by most of the value in the program, be it acquisition or support, is immaterial, and often it's around a 60-40 split. It can change on different programs, but so the major lever in affordability and availability, you can't do maintenance without, or you can't do production even without the materials. So supply chain has a very, very high effect on availability and affordability. Usually engineering and design have more of an effect on reliability. than